Hey everyone, welcome to episode 10 of Mike's Movie Talk, the show where we talk about movies. I'm Mike Myers, and along with a very special guest here, Zoe Robinson.
I'm a special guest.
And today we're going to be talking about Titanic.
Yay!
Titanic! And today, actually, is April 14th, 2021, which I definitely did not... 2022. I definitely did not plan this, but this is the 110th anniversary of when Titanic hit the iceberg.
It's your 10th episode.
And it's my... This was not planned at all. Zoe, I sent you that list of movies, and you're like, the only one I feel strongly about is Titanic. What are the?
I felt it.
Yeah.
I felt it in the air.
Lots of Titanic energy in the air right now. So anyway, Zoe, how do you feel about the movie Titanic?
I distinctly remember enjoying this movie so much as a child, so much to the point that it became my hyperfixation from the grades of like 6th to 9th grade. Me and my friends were obsessed with the Titanic. Not only just the movie, yeah, I know. Not only just the movie, but we were obsessed with I had several books about the Titanic.
Oh yeah.
About different people on the Titanic that actually existed. I went to the Titanic exhibit when with my grandma when it was in Atlanta. It was really exciting. So I don't know why this movie affected me so much, but it did because I was obsessed with it.
There's so much to know about the ship, especially the ship, and the movie too. Little facts and tidbits and everything.
I have very many weird facts about the Titanic.
That's great. We're gonna get all into that in this episode. Talking about Titanic the movie. So it came out in 1997, which that was a long time ago. I mean, none of us were even alive to see this magnificent movie come out, which we're going to talk about later, about how big this movie was. Anyway, it was written and directed by James Cameron and stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. And Kate Winslet plays a wealthy socialite named Rose, and Leonardo DiCaprio plays a poor artist named Jack, and they fall in love aboard the ship on its maiden voyage. So what a perfect little love story.
That's why 6th grade me loved it so
much. So in this movie, I just want to talk about this movie when it came out was the biggest thing in the world basically. And so it launched Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. They had obviously been in movies before, but this was this was their Star Wars. It just shot them into superstar fame. Yeah. And it was nominated for 14 Academy Awards. Bro, what?
I know. Oh my god.
I know this was good, but is it that good?
Yeah.
Do you think so? Do you think it deserved all this?
Honestly, I'm surprised that it was 14.
And it won 11.
Wow.
Yeah.
Somehow I'm simultaneously surprised, but also not, because I do think it's actually a very well-made movie.
Yeah.
I'm sure that some people might not agree, but it's also the point of romance movies typically aren't box office successes.
Yeah,
or they're box
exactly.
office successes, but they're not Academy successes. I guess in that. Oh, one thing that we actually talked about in filmmaking that's interesting, that I think is fun that I'll bring up now, is that movies that are geared towards women are obviously, they don't usually get the Academy appraisal that a lot of the movies that are geared toward mainly men. And one thing that's interesting about the Titanic is that there were 2 different trailers that were released.
Yeah, I remember.
I don't know if you were planning to talk about that.
Yeah.
There was a trailer that was released that was edited to really play up the love story aspect of that, and then there was a trailer to play up the
an action movie.
An action movie kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's why it was such a success, because it brought in both demographics together, and I guess that's why it probably won so many awards.
Yeah. I'm sure. And it was so big that it became the highest grossing movie ever up to that point.
Yeah.
Until it was beaten by Avatar, which is another James Cameron movie.
Oh my god, I didn't even
James
notice that.
Cameron popping off. As you were saying, a lot of people actually thought that this movie would just be a disaster before it came out. And I was doing some research, and film executives at the time at 20th Century Fox were talking to James Cameron, and they were super skeptical about it, and they were this is a 3-hour epic romantic movie. Like, James, what are you doing? Like, we want more Terminator, we want more aliens,
Yeah.
you know, and like shootouts and car chases and explosions and stuff. So, and he's like, no, it's not like that at all. It's gonna be great. So, obviously, he was right. Yeah, just trust me, guys. Just give me $200 million. And another thing too is like this was one of the most expensive movies ever made.
Yeah.
And it's so expensive that it actually cost more to make the movie than it did to make the actual Titanic.
Awesome.
Like adjusted for inflation.
I didn't know that at all. I love that.
So, I mean, my God. But I think, you know, like part of the reason why the movie is so good is I was doing a lot of research about like James Cameron, and you know, it turns out that he's like been passionate about the Titanic for a long time, you know, before he made this movie, and just about like shipwrecks and all that stuff, and just researching about like the real stories behind what happened, and he dove to the real wreck. I think that was a big inspiration for him because like it was like 2 or 3 years before the movie came out, and he was like looking for ideas. He dove to the actual wreck, and he was like, this is insane. And he wanted to, and in the movie, you know, that's all footage that they shot during like when they were down there. You know, it's not, that's all real wreck footage. Which he was like, we could do this in CG and stuff and just fake everything, make models of the wreck, but he's like, we gotta use this real footage. So,
I think
but just like, you know, inspiring him, and then, you know, because obviously the Titanic was one of the most like famous, you know, disasters in history, you know.
It is now.
It is, yeah. But like it also like the story that he told, you know, like during the backdrop of this tragedy is like it fits really good, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I guess.
I get it. Like the fun part about the story, and maybe why it like made such a cultural impact, is that like while it was about like this Romeo and Juliet, like this rich lady fell in love with the poor guy.
Yeah.
While it was,
together.
they can't be together. It's so sad, and they're so in love.
But she really wants to get out of the rich life.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when you talk about it.
But it also addresses like the actual like context surrounding why the Titanic sinking was so controversial, because they didn't have enough lifeboats, and they sent out lifeboats that were like half empty, and most of the people that died on that during the disaster are people that didn't have any money. And so it's also kind of talking about that in a romantical aspect.
Yeah, with the different classes.
It's addressing the like classism, I guess, is like that kind of thing. And so I think that's also why going back to the fact that it won so many Academy Awards, a lot of the Academy Award winners are ones that make like an actual cultural or societal impact. And I think that even though to a lot of people that might not be the main part of the story, I think that is what maybe James Cameron was trying to like more show off, is like, this was wrong and we should probably never do it again. We shouldn't do it again. But I
mean, there were a lot of, just talking about like the disaster in general, there were so many problems that, you know, just combined to make this just awful loss of life, you know. I mean, there's like even just like the women and children first thing, and not filling all the lifeboats, not having enough lifeboats, and you know, there were design flaws with the ship and everything, you know, with the
it's also like a commentary on capitalism, I guess. If you're thinking
we could go so deep with this. We could go deeper and deeper and deeper. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on like? I know this is a super broad, general question, but like the story in general, because I do want to talk about like, you know, the real events and the actual Titanic stuff, but like before we move on to that stuff.
Yeah. On the story of like the Titanic, I just, you know, I love Leonardo DiCaprio and anything he does. I just think he's awesome.
This was like the movie. I was on Wikipedia and it said it like ignited Leo mania.
Yeah, that would absolutely make sense.
Yeah.
He's adorable. As a woman, I have to agree. I think overall the like, I am not very good at script writing. Dr. Hersey will attest to that. But I do think like the narrative of this story is just, it's beautiful. And I think it does a good job of what we were saying, contextualizing the events that actually happened and how tragic they were. Especially with the fact that Rose ends up surviving and Jack still dies, even though both of them made it into the water. And like, so still the rich person is living in it. And so it's really highlighting the tragedy that happened. while still making it like it's basically a romance. It's a romance movie,
Yeah.
but it still somehow captures all of the essence of like what was going on at that time, and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's very well written. I think it's very well shot. I love cinematography. The little shot where they're like,
the king of the world!
Flying Jack.
Oh, yeah. Oh, both of those. Yeah, I was thinking of the other one.
It's the same thing.
Same thing.
I'm the king of the world!
Another thing I liked, is like is Rose's character development because it's not like it's not like she starts at the beginning wanting to be. I mean, she's always had doubts about wanting to be like what this life means for her. Being super wealthy, and her mother basically was like, you need to marry this guy to help out our family and prestige and stuff.
Yeah.
And they weren't actually part of like that upper class.
Yeah.
They were kind of like they really wanted to be.
I think they're like
right?
Rose's family might be upper middle class, and then her fiance's family
he's definitely
the high
big
class.
shot. Yeah.
And so she's marrying up in that scenario.
Yeah, and I think a lot of some of the scenes that I liked, just like showing her, just like the trouble that's going on in her mind, like doubting and stuff. I think there was a scene where she was like having dinner or something with them, and her mom's friends are all laughing about just like, super, it could be anything they're talking about. She's like, I don't care.
He envisioned a steamer so grand in scale and so luxurious in its appointments that its supremacy would never be challenged. And here she is, willed into solid reality. Here, here. The salmon.
You know I don't like that, Rose.
There's a shot where there's like that little girl that's like putting the little napkin down in her lap, and she's like, oh, this is how you be proper and everything. She's like, I hate this. Yeah. So, and then of course she meets Jack, and Jack shows her how she really needs to live. Or I don't know. That was a weird way to word it. But like shows her the excitement in life, I guess, and he's living his life in such a different way. And, he was like, what did he say? He's like,
insert clip here.
Yeah, insert clip here. What did he say?
Shite.
Anyway, whatever he says, he doesn't take like life for granted,
Yeah.
and he's just like live every moment to its fullest, and he's out in Paris drawing these women and drawing like one of your French girls. I had to throw that in there.
No, that was good.
Shush.
But I mean, just like he doesn't have any money, but he's like that's not what's important to him. He's happy, and I think she's looking for an excuse to get out of this life, and then when she finds Jack, she takes it.
Yeah.
It sounds cheesy.
That's why I think it's so controversial to say Titanic is a good movie, because
Yeah.
that specific thing is so overdone. But also it's so good.
I mean, when you talk about it, it's just like, oh yeah, that seems like it's been done a million times, and I mean it kind of has. But when you put it in this context, in this movie, and like the situation of like the Titanic and stuff, it makes for a really good movie, actually. I mean,
I love it.
Yeah. I wanted to know your thoughts on like the ending of the movie too, because this is like one of the things I'm just like kind of like iffy about the movie.
Yeah.
It happens in present day, which back then was mid-90s. Is the other plot where they follow up with Rose, and she's like 100 years old, and they're diving to the wreck, and they're like, where's the heart of the ocean? And she's like, I got it, I've had it this whole time.
Yeah.
But like, so she basically, like, it's not confirmed, but she basically dies at the end, maybe, in her bed. And then at the end, she goes and she sees, like, it's like she's going back, she's dying, and she sees Jack in the Titanic with all the passengers around. Like, that was something I thought, I get what they were trying to, like, wrap it up and stuff, but, like, she's lived this whole full life.
She had like a whole husband and children.
I know, exactly. That's the thing too. So after she's lived this whole full life, she goes back to the Titanic, and she goes back to Jack, some guy she met, for 3 days. After 80-something years. Like, screw her husband, like screw her kids and everything. Just go back to Jack.
Also, speaking of the ending, there's definitely room for 2 people on that.
That's the big
on that
debate,
tour.
yeah. So I actually was like looking it up, and I saw MythBusters did an
Yes.
episode, and they like tied the life jacket underneath the boat, which I would have never thought. If you were in a life or death situation and just like
I would've kept
dying
that
of
thing
hypothermia,
strapped on
you
me. At
know,
all
you wouldn't even think of that. But I mean, they could have,
Yeah.
but the movie would not have worked near as well if Jack didn't die.
That's
which
what my
that's
mom
a big
says.
reason. Yeah.
My mom also loves Titanic.
Zoe's mom, yes.
Zoe's mom agrees with you.
Yeah, I mean, because if he didn't die, then it would they'd probably go off and live their life together. I mean, I don't know. It's just
It's too easy.
It's too easy.
simple.
Yeah, it's too easy. Too simple.
It's tragical. We
It's
gotta make it
exactly more tragedy. You just need as
Give
much
me more
tragedy as
tragedy.
possible. That's
I
what
know
this movie's
like
about.
100 people died, but we need also
I
Jack
think
to
more
die
than
too.
100 people died.
I don't know.
I don't know. We're kind of not really dive in, but like talk a little bit about the real events behind this movie, because obviously Titanic was not just a movie in the 90s
No
made by James
way.
Cameron. I think a lot of people, or I don't know about a lot of people, but like some people tend to get caught up, in the movie and like, oh, the love story of Jack and Rose and everything, which as we've talked about, it's a great movie,
Mhm.
But I think the movie kind of like overshadows the real life events that happened, and people tend to forget that this was like a real disaster that happened to real people, and people who really died, and I think like it's there's been like kind of like a glamorization of the
Yeah.
Titanic, I'd say,
Yeah.
a little bit, because it's just because it's so famous, I guess, people tend to just gloss over the awful like tragic loss of life that happened.
Yeah, the fact that there was recently like a ship that was like designed in the same way the Titanic was, and you could go on a cruise for like a
I
couple
think,
of days.
yeah, I've
and
researched
act like
this
you
a
were
little
on the
bit.
Titanic, and that one freaked me out. I was like, I would never.
Is that a
get on
real
that.
thing?
I think so. I do distinctly remember that, but I think it was in like 2014, so this is like a while.
Yeah, because I was researching some stuff, and there's like a billionaire from Australia who wants to build a Titanic 2.
Yeah, maybe
And it's
that's
never
what I'm thinking
happened,
of.
and it's
Okay.
been in development for like years, but
I think I maybe heard about that, and I was like, that's just.
it's
I would
that's,
never get on
that's
that
not
boat.
cool.
It's just weird.
Even just the idea of like building that and calling it
Yeah.
Titanic 2, and just that's not cool.
It's just, it's so, it's
Whoever this guy is, you just need to just give
Just
up, man.
know.
It's
me
he's
and
been trying
Mike
to
don't
do it.
like you.
Yeah, no. But yeah, I mean, like, going back to just like the real events and stuff. I mean, the tragedy really cannot like be understated.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the whole situation of the sinking is basically like a movie in itself. Like,
Yeah.
it's just you can't make it up. Like it was, it's the biggest ship in the world at that point. On its maiden voyage, and it's just like it stood as like I'll get deeper into the Titanic,
Into the lore.
into Titanic lore, but I mean, at that point, 1912, ocean liners really dominated the travel industry as well, because planes, no one was traveling on planes, so like oceanic travel being like this super luxurious way to just not only travel but like see like an industrial achievement
Yeah.
that people had made, because it really was like the advertisements before Titanic came out, and just like just kind of basically showing it off, like this is what like industry can do right now, it was just like we don't really see that anymore, especially with like cruise ships have kind of taken over that role, but it's just not the same at all, because cruise ship, like, not only just like not mentioning the difference between cruise ships and ocean liners, but like cruise ships are I don't know, it's not like, I mean, I guess there's like Royal Caribbean and
Yeah.
stuff, but like it's not really seen as like a achievement of industry, like we made the biggest cruise ship in the world.
Now
Like,
I feel like the equivalent nowadays is like achievements in like technology. And
yeah, yeah.
I think that's Yeah.
Because we've moved so much more into like a digital technological world now instead of just, you know, industrial revolution type world.
Like the bullet train, I remember that being even more like everyone was like, I want to get on a bullet train just to see what happens. I rode one. It was fine. It was like fine.
Yeah.
It was
but
fast.
I think too, it's just such a different time now too than it was then. And you know, we can get so deep into just like the Titanic lore and stuff, nerd out on Titanic. But like, you know, I think it really was like it marked like the peak of like the golden age of ocean liners too.
Yeah.
Because afterwards, you know, a couple of years afterwards, World War I started, and that sucked for everybody.
That sucked for a lot of people.
For a lot of people. And they basically turned all the ocean liners into like, you know, troop transports and hospital ships and stuff. So the ocean liner, like, you know, the number of passengers just plummeted, you know, and then things are picking back up in the 20s. Oh, Great Depression, you know, goes back down again. And then things are picking back up. Oh, we have airplanes now. Those are kind of cool.
Let's use it to start another war.
Yeah, World War II. Oh.
Airplanes.
Okay. Then after World War II, you know, people are, you know, looking at ocean liners and like, do I really want to spend a week traveling across the ocean when I can do it in a plane? You know.
For like 3 hours.
Yeah. So I mean, just what was happening back then, you know, around the early 1910s with stuff with ocean liners was just, you know. It's just really cool.
It's just really cool.
It's really cool. I think it's really cool just researching this stuff and just going back and like the White Star Line, you know, building.
Man, you just sent a memory to the back of my brain.
Core memory, White Star.
Whoa.
But just researching this stuff, like, you know, Titanic was part of this, like, basically like super class of, it was the Olympic class it was called, of ocean liners. They had the Titanic, Olympic, and then Britannic.
Yes.
So very similar names. I think the Olympic actually lasted until the late 30s.
I think.
Which was basically like the exact same, 99% the same as Titanic, which the Titanic was a little bit heavier, so then they called it the biggest ship in the world.
Oh.
So
it's like a little bit.
That's the little flex that it had on there. But.
Look, it's the biggest ship in the world. It's like 5.
It's the same as our other ship we built before, but it's a little heavier. So.
It's a little heavier.
Yeah.
That's what you want in an ocean liner, right? Something that goes across and floats on water. You want it to be heavier.
But just like the impact that Titanic has had, obviously, you know, it's so famous and all the, just like the legacy behind it and how it changed oceanic travel. You know, I mean, back then they weren't required to have as many lifeboats, you know, as for all the passengers. And even if everyone in the Titanic's lifeboat was full, they still, you know, I think it still
was not.
It was about.
There weren't enough life jackets and there weren't enough like lifeboats. Period.
They weren't required to have that many lifeboats either, which just is astounding.
Yes, I know.
And the thing too, the legend of it being unsinkable. Yeah. You know, like the design of the ship basically was like they had like 6 different watertight or like watertight compartments basically. So if something ever does happen, they'll fill up, but it will be okay, guys. You know,
Don't worry.
But obviously, you know, there was like flaws where the watertight doors didn't go all the way up the side of the ship, so the water poured over and just.
There were several like issues with those watertight seals and like several scenarios that they ran that it would absolutely fail that they knew were very likely to happen, such as an iceberg, and they knew that going into it, and they just kind of chose. They were like, it's probably fine.
Really?
Yeah. I would look into it. It's definitely a conspiracy theory for sure.
Oh, it's because I had a different view on it because I don't know. I disagree with that.
Okay. But yeah, no. Like there are definitely accounts that say like they knew that this and this could go wrong. Yeah. In the event.
It was just very unlikely.
It was likely. It was unlikely, or they just chose not to not to do anything about it, just like they chose not to do anything about the fact that they knew they had not enough life jackets for everybody to be in, like.
And they just, I think a big part of it was like they never anticipated anything like this happening. Yes. So they're like, well, we won't need that, you know, and then they never planned for that. And I think too, like, we talk about more tragedies. More tragedies.
Yes.
You know, imagine just like, you know, Thomas Andrews was, you know, the chief like designer of this ship, and being on that ship and just being like, you know, one of the scenes in the movie that's like really like terrifying to me is that, you know, after they strike the iceberg, and he goes up to the bridge and tells Captain Smith, he's like, it's a mathematical certainty, like it will sink. You know, just like the terror.
Most unfortunate, Captain.
Water, 14 feet above the keel in 10 minutes. In the 4P, in all 3 holds, and in boiler room 6. As she goes down by the head, the water will spill over the tops of the bulkheads. At E deck, from one to the next, back and back. There's no stopping it. From this moment, no matter what we do, Titanic will founder.
But this ship can't sink.
She's made of iron, sir. I assure you, she can. And she will. It is a mathematical certainty.
And he was the designer. Oh my God! And think about, and he went down with the ship too.
Yeah.
So
I think there's a deleted clip from this, and then we'll stop talking about conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
But there's a deleted clip, if I'm remembering correctly, of the conspiracy that they knew something was going, or like that knew something major could go wrong, but they took it out with that designer.
That's interesting.
But I can't remember if it's actually in there or if it is like a deleted clip that I'm remembering like in my brain.
I don't know.
But I have no idea. I
That's
think I've
something-
watched more deleted clips than I have the actual movie at this point. But
That's something. Yeah, that's something to look into. And there's another. I haven't seen any of the deleted clips, but I read that they had a clip in there. They were gonna put in, but it was like, I think it was the Californian, if I remember the name of the ship, that had turned off its radio, you know, before it struck before Titanic struck the iceberg, and that was a lot closer than the Carpathia was, which is the ship that eventually rescued all the survivors. So just like little things like that, you know, every little thing has to go wrong. You know, the design of the ship, the number of lifeboats, even just the women and children first thing, you know. Just every little thing, even the rivets in the ship, you know, or the iceberg just happened to move at this point in the ocean, and that was on their route. I mean, every little thing just had to go wrong, which is just terrifying to think about, you know.
It literally, the Titanic sinking was literally every single thing
I
that
know.
could go wrong did go wrong.
It's awful, and just to think about every little thing like that, you know. So I don't want to end on that note. Everything's awful.
Everything was horrible.
So I mean, is there anything you want to talk about? It can be either the movie or just like Titanic
facts.
itself, or trivia or anything.
I'm trying to think. I think one way that you can spin this so that it's not ending on literally the most depressing note is like the Titanic did sink and hundreds of people lost their lives that day due to thousands, maybe something like that.
I think it was like 1,500
Yeah.
people.
A lot of people lost their lives that day, but now from that tragedy, we now have like so many rules when it comes to stuff like that.
I would hope so.
Like, I think like the idea of like classism on a sailboat, it probably like, I mean, classism exists in all of societies and it always will for the rest of our lives and probably for the rest of society. But like now we have rules. We make sure that disaster to that scale probably will never happen again. And so at least we have that and a cute little romance.
Cute little romance
Cute little
movie.
romance moment.
Actually, a big romance moment.
You're right.
Big movie.
Big movie, long one.
Yeah, and I think too, you know, talking about like, obviously it was just, you know, if anyone could have it another way, you know, the Titanic, that would have never happened, you know, this big disaster. But I think too, like the legacy of it has just spurred so much like historical, investigations and studies and decades worth of just like research that we would never have, you know, if it wasn't for this event.
I think if the Titanic didn't sink, a ship was going to sink to that scale,
Oh,
regardless. Like eventually, our horrible practices were gonna bite us in
Well,
the
I mean,
ass.
yeah. I mean, look at the Lusitania too.
Yeah.
That wasn't as big, but that's a different story because it was hit by a torpedo in World War One. So.
That's a different movie.
That's a different.
That's for a different.
I don't know if there are any
movie, Doug.
Lusitania movies.
I'm gonna make one just
don't
in
know.
case, so that Mike can talk about
Okay.
it.
That sounds great. So, anyway, I always ask the guests on here, would they recommend this movie? I think you would.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I would too.
I think everyone should watch the Titanic at least once.
Yeah,
Even
and
if you
even-
don't like romance movies.
Even if you don't like romance movies, and even if you don't know a lot about the Titanic, I think, I mean, you don't have to know anything about the Titanic.
You really don't.
to
They'll
watch
tell
this
you all you
movie.
need to
They'll
know.
tell you, yeah.
You don't have
so-
to know as much as I have.
Oh,
Knowledge.
no,
I
definitely not.
just have a weird knowledge.
No, I don't think it's weird.
Thank you.
It's
Oh
cool.
my God,
It's
stop.
But I mean, if you like Titanic, there's another movie, I haven't seen this, but it's called A Night to Remember. Have you seen that movie?
I've not seen it, but I do know what you're talking
Yeah, and it was in the 50s, I think, and I think it's super highly regarded. I mean, I haven't seen it, but that's another movie about Titanic. If you like this movie, so
about. No way.
yeah, if you want to get your Titanic fix. So, thank you guys so much for watching and listening to me and Zoe talk about all things Titanic movie and ship
Ocean
related
liners.
and ocean liner related. So we'll see you guys next summer, actually, because this is the last episode of the semester.
Next summer. You get
Or
to
this summer. This summer.
This
yeah.
summer. What are you making in the
This
summer?
summer. When school starts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. In August. Yeah. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.